Okay, let me start off by saying I'm not a diesel guy. I think the diesel engines belong in vehicles meant for towing or long distance driving, not in a sporty sedan. But I can't deny that BMW diesels are crazy fast off the line. Like, look at that. That's insane acceleration. It's commonly said horsepower sells cars, but torque wins races, and that diesel has the torque of an EV. But here's the thing, if torque is what gets you moving, why aren't diesels tearing up drag strips everywhere? Why do petrol engines still dominate in every racing series ever, except, tractor pulling? To figure this out, let's start with horsepower versus torque. Torque is simple, it's force. Think of it as how hard you can press the pedals on a bike. Horsepower, on the other hand, is about speed. It's how fast you can keep those pedals spinning while applying that force. Imagine you're starting a bike ride on a really high gear. When you press down on the pedals, you're applying a lot of torque because you have to push down hard to get the bike moving. That's torque, raw brute force. But here's the catch. Even though you're pushing as hard as you can, you're not accelerating very fast. The high gear makes it tough to spin the pedals quickly, so you can't build speed efficiently. Now shift to a lower gear. Suddenly, it's easier to spin the pedals faster. You're applying less torque with each push, but you're spinning so much faster that you can accelerate quickly. That's where horsepower comes into play. It's the combination of how much torque you're applying and how fast the engine is spinning. In fact, horsepower is calculated as torque times RPM divided by 5252. Why divide by 5252? It's all about how horsepower is defined and how rotational motion is measured. First, horsepower is an imperial unit. It's defined as the power needed to lift 550 pounds by 1 foot in 1 second. A guy named James came up with it to convert steam engines to horses, and it stuck, as arbitrary as it may seem. Engines, however, don't move things in a straight line. They rotate a crankshaft. To calculate power, we need to multiply torque, the rotational force in foot-pounds, by angular velocity, how fast it spins. Since RPM is rotations per minute, we need to convert that into radians per second. A full revolution is 2 pi radians, and 1 minute is 60 seconds. So RPM times 2 pi divided by 60 is equal to radians per second. Plugging that into the formula for power and simplifying the constants, we end up dividing by 5252. That's what ties torque, RPM and horsepower together in imperial units. You might have seen horsepower labeled as PS. That's because there are 2 different units named the same thing. Metric horsepower, labeled as PS, comes from a different definition. It's based on lifting 75 kilograms by 1 meter in 1 second. That makes metric horsepower slightly less powerful. 1 PS is about 735 watts and 1 horsepower is 746 watts. Both PS and HP are outdated. In the EU, cars are required to be labeled in watts, a more universal and physics-based unit. The funny thing is that James guy I was talking about is James Watt, the guy who Watts is named after. And yeah, I know this is a lot to take in, and even Donut Media got it wrong.
Horsepower is a measurement of work.
So it's not the simplest. Oh yeah, back to cars. So why aren't diesels dominating races? Diesel engines are like starting in high gear. They make tons of torque at low RPMs, so they are fantastic at getting things moving. But once they've launched, they can't keep up the pace. Their RPMs are limited, so they run out of pedal pretty quickly. Why? Well, diesel burns slower than petrol. The flame front in a diesel engine moves more slowly, so it can't handle high RPMs as efficiently. Plus, diesel engines are usually designed with longer piston strokes to maximize torque. That longer stroke means that pistons have to travel a greater distance, which naturally limits how fast it can rev. Petrol engines, on the other hand, are like starting in low gear. They might not have as much torque initially, but they rev much higher. That allows them to build and sustain power as speed increases. That's why petrol cars often pull ahead in races after a while, even if the diesel had a stronger launch. The petrol engine's power band is higher and wider, giving it the edge over time. And then there's EVs that blows everyone out of the water in drag races. Why? Because they have the torque of diesel engine but the rev range of a motorcycle. Some EV motors can rev up to 18,000 RPM. Combine massive torque with a sky-high RPM limit and you get that car that accelerates like nothing else. So that's the deal. Torque gets you moving, but horsepower keeps you going. And while diesels are torque monsters, they just don't have the RPMs to compete with petrol when it comes to sustained acceleration. If you want more on EVs, I have a real old video on that. Or if you want to watch a new one, I have that too. And you can subscribe here. Get me to 10k and I'll build a Turbo Civic.